Hello, it's Eamon McAuley here, and I'm back with another interview. I've got a guy now with me, Colm Holmes, that I would call a friend. I've got to know Colm this last year. I would meet him in town maybe once or twice a week. He's a holy man, a man of God. He's a former bodybuilder, powerlifter, and he was on the buses for many years. His depot was there in Astorial Park, where my wife now lives. Colm, thanks very much for agreeing to speak to me. First of all, talk to me. You were telling me that your parents were burnt out of their house, bombed out of their house in Percy Street off the Shankill before you were born.
That was back in 1941, Eamon. My mother was Heaney, and my father, he was Holmes, and they'd just been married. And anyway, it was April the 15th, 1941, when the bomb come down on Percy Street. My grandfather, grandmother, aunt and uncle, they were killed in the bomb. It was a shoot bomb, you know, and the wind, it had come down from the Beachmount area, the wind caught it, and down it came on top of the shelter. One of my mother's families survived. She just died a year ago. That was Aunt Susan. She was dug out by a little boxer you would have heard of his brother's name, Jimmy Warnock.
Oh, yes.
And this was Freddie Warnock. She lay there for a day or two before.
Right. Well, there was 4 Warnocks that boxed professionally. He might have been
right.
one of them then.
Freddie was one of them. He was finished up as a bin man, actually.
So you moved to Ballymoney?
Moved to Ballymoney.
And that's where you were born?
My father, he worked for the Belfast Telegraph. He later was to go out freelance, work for the Irish Times, a newsletter, the Irish News, also the Telegraph, amongst other newspapers. And
he also wrote a book about the Blitz in Belfast.
Yeah, you can still get his book, Bombs in Belfast. There is photographs all in it. But the night of the bomb in 41, he was out photographing, the burning buildings, bombs coming down, when he heard of what had happened in Percy Street. So he had to go up and identify my mother's family. And as my aunt, my late aunt, used to say, he never got over it. It took him to an early grave. So.
Right. Well, from Ballymoney, you were born there. You lived there for about 6 years.
No, not quite. Only about 4 years. Then we moved to number 51 Botanic Avenue. That's close to the centre of the town, as you know, Eamon. And we lived there for a short period of time. Then my mother took TB. She was in hospital close to 5 years. We moved up to the Crumlin Road, Agnes Street.
Yeah.
The Agnes Street, Crumlin Road end of Agnes Street, where we lived there for a few years. Then there was various.
That's with your granny? You lived there with your granny?
The old granny, my father's mother, and we lived there for a few years. And then there was quite a few addresses after that.
Yes.
And I lived quite a few years in the Ballysillan. Right. And they were good years before there was any troubles, you know. There was no sectarian bother whatsoever, and as you know,
it was a mixed area, you said.
Quite mixed. Everybody got on well with one another, you know. And I never ever, even from a child, my father always taught me, treat people as you find them. Never condemn anybody for their beliefs, but show them love and compassion. And my old granny, from when I was 5 years of age, had me on my knees praying every night, you know, and I'd done that right through my life, but yet there was no relationship with the one I was praying to, unfortunately.
So Ballysillan, then, a good place to grow up in?
It was a good place, you know.
Did you go to the boys' model?
No, I actually went to a school on the other end of town at Malone School. Some people have said, was that Malone Training School? But the headmaster was a friend of my father's, and he put me in there. So it was 4 bus rides a day to get to it.
Wow.
But it was.
Talk to me about some of your childhood memories.
Well, there's so many of them, but as a young child, all I wanted to
Simple pleasures in them days.
I always wanted to go to sea. I wanted to join the Merchant Navy. My father would say, if you want to go to sea, you'll go to sea, but you'll go as an officer. But then he died before my 14th birthday. I was only 43, 44 years of age. So I had always a very adventurous spirit, and I don't want to go on too long about it, but I joined the Merchant Navy, 16 years of age. My first trip to sea, I jumped ship in Cuba. That didn't last for long. I was brought back to the ship, and I was told what would have happened if I had been caught by the rebels, Fidel Castro, and they were just about to take over. This was back in 58, coming into 59. So after they'd got me back on the ship, again I jumped ship in the Dominican Republic. There was a lot of civil unrest going on. I got a minor civil war. I finished up a night or so in prison in a place called Central Rio Hyena. And I never forget the gentleman who brought me into his home and fed me and looked after me for a bit. But unfortunately the ship, or maybe fortunately, the ship stayed in port for 3 or 4 days longer than it should for engine repairs. So I never forget the day they brought me back onto the ship with the whole crew at the side cheering as a little police Land Rover brought me up.
You got married at 19?
I was married at just over 19 years of age, and unfortunately, after a few years, the marriage broke up. I had 3 of a family.
Lovely.
And a son who was a Christian from a very young age. And in those days, I hadn't much time for Christians. Though, as I said, I prayed every night for my family and loved ones and that. But even for the animals, and I know you're an animal, I would pray a lot that God would keep them from suffering. And one thing I should mention, in 1960, I was involved in a motorcycle accident. I had 3 people, 1 on behind me in a motorbike, 2 in this old sidecar. It was a BSA 1939 War Department combination. I had 2 guys from Liganeel, Sean McQuillan and John McCarroll, and a guy called David Armstrong behind me on the pillion. Anyway, this night we come down around the Horseshoe Bend, and I couldn't take the bend. The steering was faulty. I spent 6 months in hospital. The Royal Victoria, then they moved me to Musgrave Park. I had a broken femur, the right leg was hanging off me, a tibula, fibula, lung collapse, and pneumonia had set in. I had also a broken arm and other injuries in the private parts.
Goodness gracious.
But I never forget the first morning. I was in total agony, as I was for weeks after it. There was a little man, a crippled man, and he was going round the ward singing the old rugged cross. And that sort of came into my heart. I thought of what Christ must have suffered. I thought of what all through the wars, what people must have suffered and the pain, because this was the first time in my life I knew real pain. They didn't expect me to survive more than 48 hours, but I thank God that He was with me. And He taught me to have more thought for people, for animals, and through my own suffering, I was able to think of the suffering what others had to go through.
You had a great love for bodybuilding, for weightlifting, powerlifting. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, this was when, and I must say, the Busman, there was a Falls depot, Ardoyne depot, Short Strand depot, there was Mount Pottinger depot. And to me, they were I couldn't pay a big enough tribute to the Busmen of Northern Ireland. Right through the Troubles, they were...
Well, you started the buses in 1961.
1961 in Ardoyne depot. And I never seen Catholics or Protestants. We were just like one big family, one big happy family. There's always a few individuals, with bitterness and bigotry. But thank God that most of them were lovely people. If there was any troubles, they were all together. They went up and down the roads, they were getting hijacked, buses burned, and so many of them. One man in particular, the most hijacked. I'll introduce you to him sometime, Eamon, if you want to meet him. But he was the most hijacked driver during the Troubles. But in 1974-75, I wrote a letter to the managing director, who was German, Mr. Heubach, asking him for a room in Ardoyne Depot that we could, keep fit, as it were, and where drivers on their breaks could come in and, relax for an hour, keep fit. And I emphasised in the letter that he had found there was probably less people out on the sick. Talking about normal sickness.
Yes.
For each day there was guys robbed at gunpoint, at knife point, and their money taken. It was enough robbing them, but sometimes they were beat up too. But this was the way things were going in the late 60s, early 70s. But we started this, he gave me a room in Ardoyne Depot. We started this health club, and for years we had a weightlifting league, there was the Falls Depot, Ardoyne Depot, and there was the Ardoyne club down in Flack Street, you're probably aware of, Eamon, a nice bunch of lads there too. And we had these leagues going, Protestants and Catholics, coming up and united in their sport, just like the boxers that I've met in recent times. Is just one bunch of lovely guys, no bigotry or...
Well, I've seen a photo of you, Colm, and this photo was taken late in your life, 1991, and you were absolutely huge. I mean, you were massive. Yeah. I mean, you were like Arnold Schwarzenegger. So, I mean, you were serious into your bodybuilding, into your powerlifting.
Yeah. That was 4 days a week. It
wasn't just a casual thing. I mean, you were a serious lifter.
4 days a week I was at it, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, and then Tuesday, Thursday, and that's the way it went for years. Maybe 3 or 4 hour workouts, and we had so many friends, competing. And then in the later years, I never was one for medals or cups or anything else. I just wanted basically to keep fit and enjoy health, sitting in a bus all day long, or as I sat in a car when they promoted me to inspector for sometimes 16 hours a day. You needed to get the exercise.
Well, the busmen were on the front line during the Troubles, and there was a lot of casualties. You said you lost a lot of dear friends. Talk to me about that.
Yes, there was on one occasion I was the first up the stairs, and Inspector Alec Miller, he was lying on the floor with the blood just seeping out of him. He survived a few hours. That was a guy had just come in and asked for him by name, went up the stairs and shot him. And maybe an hour after that, the Mr. Heubach, the managing director, came in. I'll never forget it. When the forensic people had finished, he came up with a mop and bucket, and he cleaned up the room where Alec had been. He had been with a couple of friends, one on either side of him, but it was Alec that was the one that died. And then there was my friend Pt1. He was shot dead at the wheel of the bus too. And his brother...
I remember that, yes, around about 1973, 74.
Yes. And then his brother...
Francie.
I remember that day I stood at the graveside with Frank, or Francie as you call him, and we were both weeping. And not just a year or two after that, he was murdered
brutally
too.
Murdered, yes. And of course, Harry Bradshaw was
Harry
a friend
Bradshaw was a dear friend of mine, and I'll never forget that.
1977.
77. He told his wife that morning, going out, one of us is going to get it today, not knowing he would be the one, In actual fact, I had been keeping some of them going, I was working that day too, but they were going out in civvies, with suits and that on, not wanting to have an open attraction to somebody putting a bullet in them. But Harry was a dear friend, and I remember carrying the coffin up at Carmoney Cemetery, and just a time of, and I just, I pray
You
for
went out to work in the morning and you didn't know if you were going to come back.
exactly. I mean,
It's dreadful, dreadful.
That's just
But
the
you
way.
knew some Ardoyne men. You mentioned Michael O'Hare. You mentioned Lenny McCulloch, Kojak Maholland. You knew all them boys. I know them boys.
Yeah, I
Talk
knew
to me
all
about that.
Well,
Some great friendships and camaraderie. As you say, like a family, like the boxing family.
lovely.
We're
and
all
the
one.
humour was always there, you know. And if there was a problem in the depot, the buses would be setting fire or whatever, we're all out helping, you know. And the one thing I can remember about Michael O'Hare was he had a wee son, and he died on the same day as my mother. That was back in 1993.
Yeah, that's right.
And
yeah.
I went to the funeral that just the morning before my mother's funeral,
dear.
and I'll never forget Michael. There was another bus driver who was nicknamed the Fridge. He was out of the Falls Depot, a big young strapping man, and he died the same day as my mother also. I think it was a heart attack, but
Great times, happy
just,
memories.
we're all just one big happy family. Ardoyne, I was there all those years, and I grew to love and respect and made so many friends among them, you know.
You took early retirement, 1987, was it? I mean, that was only a year or two before the bus depot was pulled down.
That's true. But 10 years before that, I had been, well, it was through my son.
I was going to come to that, yeah. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, well, he had been going out as a missionary at one time. He wanted to, there was a missionary ship called the Doulas. He was standing by it in Belfast. I thought it was a waste of life, a waste of his education. So he granted me my wishes, and then he was to join against my will, really. He was of age. He joined the RUC.